Hello, welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto. Today we're going to talk about whether or not you need to pay a ticket you get in another state. If you got a ticket in another state for a traffic infraction, do you have to pay it? And the answer is probably. But someone asked me this just today because a friend of theirs got a ticket in Michigan and the person doesn't live in Michigan. And my friend said, should this person pay the ticket? Because can't they just ignore it? Because Michigan's not a part of the driver's license compact. So I said, well, it's a complicated answer, as you might imagine, so I'll do a video on it. But basically, the situation is this. You know that if you're driving a vehicle in any state and you commit a traffic infraction, police officer pulls you over, gives you a ticket. Along with the fine associated with the ticket, there are probably points associated with it if it's a moving violation. So you're speeding a couple miles an hour over, might be 2 points. Reckless driving might be 6 points. But if you get 12 points in a 24-month period in Michigan, your license can be suspended and then you can't drive. But worse, even before it's suspended, if you get 4 or 5 or more points in your license, your insurance company might jack your rates on you because they consider you an unsafe driver the way you drive because you're obviously crazy. You got all these points on your license. So the points matter. But the problem in the old days is that, let's suppose you lived in Michigan and you went on vacation out west and you're driving through Utah and you get a ticket out in Utah. You come back to Michigan and whatever happened in Utah apparently stays in Utah, or at least back then it did. And so somebody would say, well, wait a second, you got a ticket out there but it's not on your driving record here? That doesn't seem right. So starting in the 1960s, they came up with a thing called the Driver's License Compact. And the Driver's License Compact was an agreement among states that if you joined this group, you agreed to share information regarding licenses and revocations and points and convictions on major traffic offenses. It started out with big stuff, reckless driving, vehicular manslaughter, things of that nature. But eventually it got down to everything, pretty much all moving violations. So if a state you're driving in gives you a ticket for something that your state recognizes as a pointable offense, when you get back to your home state, you might find out that the points from the other state are now on your local driving record, your state driving record. And that's because of the Driver's License Compact, Driver License Compact. And the thing about the compact is that not all 50 states are members. In fact, right now they think 44 states are members. Nevada was the first state to join the compact in 1961, but they dropped out later. But now you've got a majority of states are members of the Driver License Compact. So the way it works right now is Maine, Wisconsin, Georgia, Michigan, and Tennessee are not members of the compact. So what that means is that if you're driving in Michigan and you get a ticket here and you get points on the ticket normally, like if I was driving here and I'd get the points. But you're from another state. You're from, say, Utah. Well, guess what? Michigan and Utah don't share information back and forth because Michigan is not a member of the compact. So we might give you a ticket that's got fines and costs associated with it and got points associated with it, but Utah won't pick up the points from us because we're not a member of the compact. And likewise, if I drove in Utah and got a ticket out there with points associated with it, those points wouldn't show up on my license here in Michigan, not member of the compact. So a lot of people say, wait a second, does that mean I can now go to Maine, Wisconsin, Georgia, Michigan, or Tennessee and drive like a maniac? And the answer is, of course, no. No one said that. They just don't share the information back and forth, and they don't trade the points back and forth. So if you were driving in Michigan and you got a severe enough ticket, and you look at the ticket and it says, if you want to contest this ticket, show up within 2 weeks and file some paperwork and go to court, maybe hire a fancy pants attorney and see what you can do. And you go, well, 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be back home in Utah. Screw it, I'm just going to go home to Utah. So you go home to Utah and you just ignore that ticket because Michigan's not a member of the Driver's License Compact. So what will happen then, of course, is that Michigan is going to have this thing in their record and it's going to say, oh, there's a violation here. It's a process through. No response. Person didn't show up for court. Depending on whether it's a crime or a civil infraction, you'll either be found responsible or guilty because you didn't show up. And now that'll go into the records in Michigan. You might still say, Steve, who cares? I'll never go back to Michigan. Well, a bench warrant might issue for your arrest. Now, here's the thing. The bench warrant that issues for your arrest also might only stay in Michigan. Let's suppose it was, you got ticketed for something that's not going to end the world with respect to, the crime of the century. Um, there's still going to be a bench warrant issued for your arrest because there's this thing you didn't take care of. And now that'll go into the system. It won't go into the driver's license compact because Michigan's not a member of that, but it'll go into the system. The system's like your permanent record. And so once this bench warrant gets issued and goes in the system, it might just sit there. It might just sit there. And I know people who've told me that they've been picked up on a bench warrant that they didn't know existed, and they're driving through a state or they're driving through their own state, and they thought they had no run-ins with the law, and they get picked up for something, and it turns out that either there was a mistake 20 years ago where someone else got ticketed with a similar name, or this person had something they ignored that they thought would go away, and it's been so long, I assumed it had gone away by now. And so, let's get back to this perfect scenario. You live in Utah, and you got a ticket in Michigan, and you decided to ignore the ticket because you live in Utah, and you have no intention of ever going back to Michigan again. Ever. You're never going to go to Michigan again. It's a beautiful state. You should come visit. The problem with that, of course, is that there's a bench warrant in the system. And depending on what kind of jobs you do in your life, you may be subject to background checks, for instance. I know people who've had background checks done where they actually pull their criminal record. They pull their driving abstract. They pull all kinds of stuff. I've heard of people actually having their neighbors interviewed in a background check for a government job. So, I mean, the amount of nitpicking and digging they might do with you, who knows? Depends what kind of work you do. Now, if you live in a Unabomber-style shack out in the Dakotas and have no intention of ever contacting anybody in civilization, and you're going to live off the grid and drink rainwater, if the feds allow that, it's possible that this will never bother you again. You can sit in your Unabomber-style shack, write your manifesto, and probably never have a run-in with the law or anybody who will bother you about this bench warrant that's floating out there for you. But most people don't live that far off the grid. And so, you might think, something that I still don't see this. Well, it's a cost-benefit analysis. Everything in life actually often boils down to that. What's it going to cost me? Not just money, time, effort, aggravation, mental anguish, versus what's the benefit I'm going to get from my actions. So you got a speeding ticket in Michigan, a couple $100. You could pay it, or you could not pay it, never go back to Michigan again. You might not consider that a cost, but I would. But also, what if the bench warrant gets into the system somehow and something happens somewhere and it matters? Was that worth a couple $100 to you? That's a question you can ask yourself. And like I said, it might be that nothing bad ever happens to you. You might be one of those blessed, lucky people that nothing bad ever happens to you. It's possible. But remember, I'm the attorney. And in this relationship that you and I have, I'm the paranoid one. That's what I get paid to do. So let me tell you a couple of crazy things that you might not know about. For instance, the driver license compact, which appears to be among the states, some states have got agreements with the good people of Canada. So I'll tell you right now that New York, Maine, and Florida all have agreements with Quebec. So if you are driving in New York, Maine, and Florida, but you're from Quebec, and you get a ticket, that might show up on your Quebec driving record. I'll admit I know nothing about Canadian driving records and how that works, but all I know is they appear to have some form of agreement. And I'm also here to tell you that despite the fact that Michigan is not a part of the driver's license compact, they have an agreement with Ontario, the wonderful people of Ontario, Canada. So if you get a ticket in Canada, but you're from Michigan, that might haunt you. And if you get a ticket in Michigan and you're from Ontario, that might haunt you. I remember kids, this is going way back when I was a kid, but I remember kids going to Canada because at one point in time, and it might be true still, I don't know, the drinking age was younger, it was lower in Canada than it was in America. So a lot of kids would cross the border and drink in Canada, and they would come back to America, usually loaded in the alcoholic sense. And of course, many times they'd get busted just after they crossed the border into Michigan. But I also know kids who went to Canada and got in legal trouble over there and just thought, okay, as long as I can make it back to America, I'm good to go. Well, it depends. If it was a traffic offense, there's that agreement Michigan's got with Ontario. So it might be a problem. So a lot of this stuff, this idea that you're going to get to skate on something because of technicality in the law and the fact that Michigan's not a member of the compact or some other state's not a member, Maine or Wisconsin, Georgia, and Tennessee. If you want to live dangerously and you're going to rule out all the possibilities of ever having a good background check done on you, and you really think that you can go through your life and never set foot in that state again, yeah, you might get away with it. But the question is that worth the couple $100 it would cost you just to pay the ticket? So my advice to you is, just because somebody's not in a compact, don't take that as a license to just ignore the ticket. Questions or comments, put them below. Otherwise, talk to you later. Bye-bye.